Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Finance Podcast. My name is Paul Ellis, and I'm your host for these programs about developments in this fast-growing industry. T. Ganbold is co-founder and CEO at Improvability AI, the generative AI improvement engine for sustainability, which is making sustainability cost-effective for everyone. She was co-founder and chief growth officer of Clear AI, optimizing supply chains for sustainability utilizing knowledge graphs. Improvability enables companies to enhance their sustainability focus and increase profits through the power of AI automation. Intuitive AI agents and applications that automate tasks and workflows to lower costs in the business model and the supply chains. Clients use Improvability RAG Platform to automate reporting, insights, and research based on their private data and documents. They also work with Improvability to create their own platforms for clients or teams. Hello, T, and welcome to the Sustainable Finance Podcast.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm so delighted to be here. I'm dialing in from London.
Oh, that's wonderful. You've been at a conference over there, right? Or at a summit. Please tell us about it.
Yes, and thank you again for having me. I am so delighted. You've got such an incredible following and reputation, Paul.
Oh, thank you very much.
And as mentioned, I am in London, and last week I attended the Sustainable Market Initiative gathering for CEOs. It was a spring summit for CEOs, and it was, we gathered about, I would say, 200 of leaders from CEOs of Bank of America to CEOs of funds to CEOs of private institutions that are the actual corporates who the private equities own. So it was a mix, and there were a few technology companies, which I'm delighted to have been part of and representing.
That's terrific. So you met a lot of new people, I'm sure, and made a lot of connections for your firm. That's a wonderful opportunity. I know we were just at the Wall Street Green Summit last week, where we had a similar experience, not at a palace, but, at the Cornell Club in New York City. So let's get into our dialogue for the day, which is that I want to start by making a statement, but also turn it into a question for you. And it's my experience that good business decision makers use some method of decision intelligence to determine their needs in any given situation. How can generative AI support and improve that process for sustainability?
That's such a great question, Paul. And I really allude to what I've been discussing with other CEOs in the last week. So currently, let's take the scenario of what we have right now, the Sustainable Markets Initiative. There are 200 CEOs with the operating billion-dollar businesses or investing in billion-dollar companies. And there is a level of understanding that there's a consensus of what needs to happen, but to actually decide is very challenging. There's a lot of debate. For example, in the real estate task force, there was debate over whether hydrogen or biofuels should be used. So that debate is happening in the real estate task force. That requires the energy task force to also tune in and provide that intelligence. This is a very human, collaborative process, but the truth of the matter is we would have better decision-making if we had this cross-pollination of information from both task forces and the latest research being surfaced to decision-makers using generative AI. So if, imagine your experience with ChatGPT. You might ask ChatGPT for marketing, help you write marketing as a consumer. But in the business world or the finance world, it needs to be very accurate. And it needs to come from sources that you can trust. So from a small community of researchers that you trust, you want that intelligence to surface to you to help you make decision. For example, in the real estate scenario, you want the latest research on fuels so that you can be informed to go into a meeting, to inform so many other stakeholders. So at the moment, we are, and business leaders are going into meetings with incomplete information because we simply, as humans, we are making decisions on a few different data points, but we don't have the latest research at hand from the energy sector, for example, because information is so disparate right now. Knowledge is fragmented. The internet is a bit like an ocean, and we need a generative AI that is based on collective intelligence from scientists, from researchers, from the top leaders in industry to say this is verified, truthful information, and let's work off that. That's when decision making is going to be much better for us all.
So, T, I completely agree with you. And of course, one of the big issues from that perspective is that many leaders, as well as the people who are sourcing the data within their companies, are very hesitant to share that information across a broad swath of even their own sectors of the economy for competitive reasons. Talk a little bit about that. Was that part of the dialogue at the conference?
That is an assumption, I believe, that is out there. But if you are working towards a collective goal, so everyone at the Sustainable Markets Initiative had a collective goal. They would like to invest in companies that are addressing sustainability, that are considering regulations and making sure it's part of their business model, and are already making sure that they're accounting for it. So within that collective, it is reasonable to suggest that they want to share the latest research. Because if you're not part of that collective, it is fair to say you don't want to share information. That is totally fine. But this collective wants to progress, wants to invest in companies that are already accounting for such risk. And that sort of collective will share information. We cannot expect everyone on the planet to, and I don't think that's also realistic. It's a little bit like OPEC. OPEC shares information based on OPEC's interest. OPEC is very powerful because OPEC member states share information so that their interest of keeping oil prices high, their interest is served, and any bit of intelligence that can serve OPEC's interest will be shared. In the Sustainable Markets Initiative's case, any intelligence that can help further the goals of the Sustainable Markets Initiative can be shared and will be shared. And anything that is, so proprietary data is a different matter. So for example, sharing customer data, sharing supplier data, if you think that there's something wrong with that supplier, you don't want to share. But you might want to share intelligence on a supplier that is doing very positive things, because it could save everyone in the collective time to do due diligence and do the repetitive work. And then finally, competitive information should always be within the bounds of an organization. But there are certain knowledge that a community needs. For example, finance, those who are lending to you, those who are insuring you, those who are creating regulation. There is collective intelligence that needs to be shared, and it is shared. And that is the current reality. It is shared right now. It just needs to be shared better, and it needs to be less fragmented. It needs to be clearer.
Yes.
For everyone to utilize that information. And that's what generative AI is very, very useful for.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for that explanation. Now, I'm going to ask you to explain something else for me, and I would expect many of our Sustainable Finance podcast followers, what a proactive AI agent does and how it supports decision intelligence.
Absolutely, Paul. So in the AI space, an AI agent is an emerging field. The reason is in the past, AI has been used for predictive analytics on a few pieces of information, forecasting or better decision making with a few sets of data. Where AI is going is that it is going to be much more proactive. So I'll give you an example. Meta, so formerly known as Facebook, they have an AI agent connecting to their 1% responsible supplier goal. So if you're at Meta and you're the chief sustainability officer, you've created this goal for the international, for all the different stakeholders, for your investors, for regulators, for your own even teams. And it says, we are going to have 1% responsible suppliers. So 1%. You've committed to that in your report, your sustainability report. What an AI agent does is connect your report that you've communicated to the world to an internal database of procurement information, invoice information, so that when teams are about to renew their contract 3 months in advance, they will be notified, and the AI agent would speak to them and say, you're about to renew in 3 months the supplier. Have you considered these 10 suppliers for, let's say, non-discretionary spend like pencils? These pencils, we found an alternative supplier, 10 alternative suppliers you can interview. Can you have a look at these? Because in 3 months' time, you're going to have to renew your contract with somebody, because Meta needs pencils, because engineers like to draw. And, they do. They like to draw. They like pen and paper and pencils. And these are responsible suppliers because they've recycled a particular source, and here are 10. So that's what an AI agent is. It connects a very large, strategic goal set out in a report with a very specific sort of set of data, such as procurement information. Meta have probably got billions of suppliers around the world trying to sell to them. So again, a lot of data there. And they've got also invoice data. So they know when the contracts are up. They've got contracts. So that's what an AI agent does. It connects these dots, which really is the role of a sustainable procurement officer or someone in the procurement team having to make these decisions. But it could be much more intelligent. So that is what an AI agent does. It connects these dots. It really engages different teams who know nothing about sustainability, but they probably care, because a lot of people in Silicon Valley care about where their pencils come from. So it does this amazing thing of allowing Meta to deliver on a wider goal, but also it allows the people within Meta to feel that the company is actually caring and being proactive.
That's really interesting. I think you've partially answered our next question here, but I'll start from the beginning of it anyway. When C-suite and board-level leaders of a company take the initial step of deciding what sustainability data to measure, so for example, in this case, where do we get our pencils, the tracking is often done by data vendors, which rarely produces industry competitive or AI sustainability outperformance. So how does Improvability AI support the performance, the how and the why of measurement for sustainability data and for competitive outperformance results by the firm?
So that question really leads me to what is happening in the market right now.
Okay,
so
good.
So the current market, for anyone watching out there, most large financial services or corporates have to deal with one large company that does supply chain due diligence. This one company is operating a bit like a cartel. A company called EcoVadis, while it is fantastic and it has done a fantastic job for the last 10 years, it's a French company that helps companies do supply chain due diligence, gives ratings. The issue with it and the business model is that it is so restrictive. For example, if you're Meta and you ask all your suppliers to do supply chain due diligence, currently, if you're a supplier under 25 people, you have to pay $900 US. That's a lot. If you're a company with 25 people, 900 is a lot. And it, of course, scales, costs more with the amount of people. So what we've done there to address that problem, to gather more information on responsible and sustainable suppliers, is to make it free, make this entire process free. And we've got very large companies saying, we really want to make this free until verification. So verification is very important. So when companies give their data on, what they're actually doing from a, let's say, going back to pencils, I'm a pencil supplier and I am using X material. My people are treated well and we are following the rules. Verification of that data is when you provide evidence that you're actually doing what you say you are. So whether it's certificates or evidence of a particular material or getting, let's say, you're paying your taxes, just evidence. And so that is verification. But the initial part, it should be free. So for you to ask a company if they're sustainable or not should be free until you want to double check. So that's the problem right now. Another problem that we address, so that's number one. Another problem we address is that a lot of companies have a lot of research and a lot of data within their own four walls. And a lot of the time it's fantastic knowledge. So there's a presumption that, we have to go on the internet for certain information. But actually, if you're a industry leader or if you're a company, the types that we're speaking with or the category we're talking with is 100 million plus turnover. These are the companies that are being regulated in California or in Europe. These companies have done a lot of research on what is a sustainable supplier to them and what is not. So actually, all they need to do is to bring that data so that it's understandable. And this is where generative AI is very helpful, to resurface information within one's own database of which suppliers, let's say all your supplier data is in one place in a company. And you could ask, and I'll give you a scenario, a university in America that is trying to attract the top Gen Z, around the world, because that's how they get their revenue and their ranking. They have signed a pledge to be part of the Cool Foods initiatives, so COOL. It means they're providing their students with sustainable food. So how do they do this? And what is the process? They have to understand all their suppliers and what they're doing. And they have to understand, let's say, tomato. We all like tomato in our sandwiches, in our salads. So they would need to understand all their suppliers of tomatoes, and they would need to understand who is sustainable and who is not. That intelligence could be, at least they have an idea of who their suppliers are right now. They could surface all that data of all their tomato suppliers, number one. They need to do that. Number two, they might need to do due diligence on all their suppliers. So that's when number one comes in, the sustainability due diligence process. But fundamentally, a lot of knowledge is already sitting within an organization's database already. And there are a lot of notes, there's a lot of history already there. People can start automating report writing already on the platform. So that's an area where we think companies really need help lowering their costs. You can go on the platform, you can start automating internal CEO memos. And we're now going to start automating CSRD reports, which is a massive cost to organizations.
Yes, the regulatory infrastructure, starting in Europe, right? Because that's where everything begins, it seems. So that's a good example of a place to start. How can universities or companies get started on the path to making sustainability competitive and profitable with AI, if they're not already doing that?
Yeah, so our key goal is to help companies to become sustainable at an affordable and accessible cost. Because if it is very costly, no one is going to become sustainable. And that's how a company can focus on their profitability. Becoming sustainable should not be a huge cost center. So what we've done is lower the access to entry to become a sustainable company. So the pricing of the existing incumbents is ludicrous. I'll compare it to Adobe. Before Canva came about, Adobe was so expensive. So you only had a few companies with nice design. I don't know if you use Canva, Paul, but...
I have, yes.
Yes. Remember before when it was only Adobe? It was like 7,500. So only a few companies can afford a designer who even knew how to use Adobe to then design marketing materials for companies. So only a few companies looked presentable. Everyone else had terrible marketing. So this is where Canva came about. So that businesses could have good design. So that's what happened with Adobe. The pricing model was just so out of whack. Canva has democratized access to good design. What we're doing is we see the incumbents as Adobe. They are making it so expensive to become sustainable that the price needs to go down. So we are making it affordable and accessible for businesses to become sustainable. It should be normal to be a sustainable business. It should be, and it will be, with our mission, so that businesses can focus on profit, because that's why they are there, to generate returns for their different stakeholders, whether it is their investors, their customers, for their employees. And so we want them to go back to doing what they're very good at by lowering the costs to becoming sustainable.
Okay. Well, listen, that's a fantastic mission. So we want to know where online can followers of the Sustainable Finance podcast go to learn more about Improvability AI, and how they can get in touch with you to learn more about the topics that we discussed in today's episode.
Thank you so much, Paul. Anyone here can go to our website, improvability.ai, to learn a little bit more. They can also go to app.improvability.ai to go on the platform, start querying information on public companies. Of course, only public companies you can ask questions about. But if they want to test it on their own companies, then they can access it.
Okay. Anything else, T, that you wanted to offer our followers in terms of what they can come to you for before we sign off today?
I'd love for companies to get in touch, share their pains, what they're struggling with, how we can help them with lower cost, more accessible tool for them to actually become sustainable. Most organizations do want to get better. They want, really, because their customers are asking for it. If they need help, please get in touch. We've got, our team will be delighted to help and really be the painkiller in this.
Terrific. Well, thanks again to T. Ganbold, co-founder and CEO of Improvability AI, for joining me today in this episode. And our followers for the Sustainable Finance Podcast can join us again next week for another episode. I'm Paul Ellis, and this is the Sustainable Finance Podcast.